Hello and welcome to another Hand Drink Solo wine info video where we review curious wines for curious minds. And if you're the kind of wine lover who's not afraid of having your prejudices and preconceptions prodded and poked and politely shattered, then you should know that we have almost 500 videos just like this one, and it's totally worth your while giving us a like and subscribing to the Hand Drink Solo YouTube channel. Now, today's wine of the day is the Mother Rock White Blend 2022, which is the last of its kind, at least for the foreseeable future. So this is kind of a farewell video, I guess, and if that sounds familiar, that'll be because we did another farewell video to a Johan Meyer or Mother Rock wine just a few months ago, and that was the Pole Meat Chardonnay, also the 2022. And you might start asking yourself, well, is Johan Meyer committing some sort of Venus hurry-kiri? Thankfully, the truth is a little more joyous and far more exciting. The real reason that these wines are all coming to an end is because new wines are being born. You see, Johan Meyer has an estate called Rocxk Vineyards, which is right up on the northern end of the Swartland at about 700 meters above sea level. And on this estate of Rocxk Vineyards, new vines are slowly maturing, and so the fruit from these vines is improving, and so they are coming online and producing more and more estate wines for the Johan Meyer Mother Rock range and Rocxk Vineyards. So rather than mourning the loss of some of these fantastic wines that we have with us today, we should be looking forward to the new wines that come online. And I'm going to leave a link to a video that will explain all the joy that you can find up on Rocxk Vineyards. I've always seen the Mother Rock White Blend as a kind of marker that plots points along the winemaking journey of Johan Meyer. I said a few years ago that I felt like Johan would make statements before he'd make wines, in the sense that some of the stuff he produced almost seemed confrontational, like a reactionary impulse against some of the wines in South Africa at the time. And so you'd have these crazy, zany, zingy, high acid wines that could be hugely acerbic and angular. Now, it is possible that I just wasn't smart enough to get them at the time, or it's possible that Johan was in fact being a little more reactionary than was needed and pushing the wines further than they needed to go. It's very hard to tell. But what I can say about the Mother Rock 2022 right now is that while it is every bit as zany and pithy and textured as it's always been, it is also complemented by some concentration and dynamics of fruit. And so you have a wine that is eccentric, but also drinkable. Now, this is not selling out. That's not Johan going mainstream or commercial. That is Johan Meyer mastering his craft. Because when a winemaker is able to make a wine that can prove a point by being unusual, but still be completely drinkable and appeal to a broad spectrum of wine drinkers far beyond the tiny little masochistic circle of wine geeks that normally hang around bottles like that, well, that is a genuine high point. And that is why I think Johan Meyer is one of the most exciting winemakers in South Africa at the moment. And he's not just doing exciting things in the bottle, but he's pioneering new regions in South Africa and single-handedly changing what Swartland wines can be. When we get back to the wine of the day, which is the Mother Rock White Blend 2022, it can feel a little bit like a sort of LSD-induced Languedoc fever dream. But when it comes to Swartland wines, I guess it's actually pretty much on point. In fact, some might even go so far as to say that it's textbook Swartland, if Swartland is allowed to have a wine textbook. The wine is made up of about a third of Roussanne, and then it's got a fifth of Semillon, a fifth of Viognier, and then splashes of Chenin Blanc and Grenache Blanc to fill up the rest of the blend. And it's absolutely no accident that all of these south of France cultivars are blended together in the Swartland, because the Mediterranean varietals really seem to do rather well in the quite hot, dry Swartland terroir. I'd go further to say that, in fact, it's not just the Swartland, but across the South African winelands, our very best white blends are featuring these combinations of cultivars like Roussanne and Marsanne, Grenache Blanc, and even Verdelho, obviously all packed around the star core player of Chenin Blanc. But I guess it's time to get our nose out of the textbook and into the glass. When we give this guy a sniff, well, unsurprisingly, it's a little unusual, because you have slightly salty sourdough note to it, you have a herbal stemmy lift, and then you've got tart Seville orange over here, a little bit of perhaps whiter citrus, and then stone fruit as well. And then the real curveball is a kind of almost tropical papaya flesh. And when you try and make sense of this wine, you look at the winemaking specs and you see that when the grapes were picked, they were picked at a broad range of ripeness from like 19 all the way through to 23 and a half. And so it's kind of like picking players for a rugby team, right? Not everybody can be a prop. You need to have your little scrum half and your fleet of foot wing, and then you need this long lock and your tubby prop, and really those all play different roles. And so it is with riper, richer grapes that produce riper, richer fruit, or perhaps lean grapes that have great acidity and a little bit of a green citrus element to it, and those all work together to create something quite dynamic. But enough guesswork, let's taste and see if it is dynamic as the nose suggests. Well, we did talk about how Johan loves picking on acid and loves acid in his wines. And in fact, because he's a natural winemaker, he can't throw all the sulfur in, so he actually needs acid and low pH in order to make sure that his wines are microbially stable. So it's no surprise that your mouth really does water with this like tart Seville orange, slightly unripe nectarine. There's even a bit of tart apricot as well. But as I mentioned earlier, in and around it, softening the whole thing is this riper, slightly sweeter papaya tropical fruit. There is also a little bit of grippiness to it. There's a little bit of tannin. There's a little bit of a herbal, stemmy feel to it. And why is that? Well, when he was making the wine, Johan ferments 70% as whole bunch press. So it sits in the press with its stems, and then the juice is pressed into the fermentation vat. The other 30% is fermented on its skins and stems. So 100% of the grapes got to have their juice squeezed out with the stems present, and that gives a little bit of spice, a little bit of tannin. Then again, you also would expect, because of that big portion fermented on the skins, that it would be super grippy and kind of gnarly and in your face, but it's not. It's actually got a beautiful, pithy kind of frame that is not a heavy corset, but rather just a kind of lace detail around the edge that manages to tie together the really beautiful dynamic mix of stone fruit and citrus and that tropical papaya, which, by the way, is beautifully concentrated. One more thing you might have noticed is a little bit of a kind of maybe smoky, flinty kind of river stone thing, and that is reduction on a wine. And there's videos where I talk about what reduction is and how it works on wine. You're welcome to watch those later. But what Johan does here is, once he's fermented things in barrel and let them rest in barrel for a bit, he then moves them back to stainless steel tank, which is kind of an oxygen-starved environment. In fact, they do this in Burgundy as well to bring back a sense of stony reduction to the wines, this kind of fresh sharpness, this mineral element that is not really tasting minerals. You're almost feeling that stony feel as a result of this reductive process. So he's taken a trick out of Burgundian Chardonnay and put it to work in this particular white blend. And I guess the end result is kind of what we said at the beginning, this LSD-induced Languedoc fever dream, but executed with technical proficiency right in the Swartland. So what I'm going to do is, while you pour yourself a second glass of this, I'm going to leave a link to 2 videos. One of them is going to be telling you all about Platteklip vineyards, and you can see what he's getting up to in there, how crazy the soils are, if you can even call them soils. And the other video talks a little bit about one of Johan Meyer's carbonic maceration Pinot Noir wines, which is another fascinating bottle that you just have to get your hands on.